Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Happy Halloween to you. Thanks so much for being here with us on Halloween. And I will say this because I know we have young listeners who might need to be reminded. There's little tiny little people out today and they're going to trip over their costumes. So drive extra slow and extra carefully, please. Those of you who are on the road. The number here is 888-318-7884 and a perfect opportunity to do weird questions with Jimmy Akin. Therefore, I don't know why I just gave out the phone number. I just looked and noticed I have all the questions. Jimmy Akin is our guest senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, the podcaster behind Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World and the Jimmy Akin podcast. Hi, Jimmy. Happy Halloween.
Howdy, how's it going? Happy Halloween to you too.
It's going very well. It's going very well. I for a moment there, I forgot we have the questions. It's a weird question show, and I've got a ton of weird questions for you. I had a thought though that it's Halloween. It's a Friday. There must be something spooky on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Was I right or not?
Well, there's usually something spooky on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
But today it's also a fifth Friday, so today it's weird questions, so that's spooky. And the lead weird question for Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World is, did Jesus have extraterrestrial sheep?
I have forgotten that question. I did that question with you?
Mm-hmm.
I have forgotten. Did Jesus have extraterrestrials? I got to go back and listen. That does not seem like one that I would forget. Check it out at mysterious.fm or wherever you get your podcasts, or go to the Jimmy Akin YouTube channel. There's a ton of stuff on the Jimmy Akin YouTube channel. Jimmy, off we go. And I'm very grateful. We're starting with a ghost question. This is the perfect day to start with a ghost question. Philip325 wanted to know this. If ghosts may be souls from purgatory, whom God has permitted for a particular reason to appear and interact with the living, why don't all ghosts ask for masses to be said for them?
Okay, so there's several parts to this question. Now, Philip says, if ghosts may be souls from purgatory, and that's an if. And he's left open another possibility, which is that some ghosts might not be souls from purgatory. There also could be ghosts from heaven or hell. Now, we commonly interpret the appearances of souls from heaven as something other than ghosts, but fundamentally it goes in the same category of an appearance of a departed human spirit. In parapsychology, there's a standard term that's applied to all of them, and it's actually the same term that historically has been used for the appearance of any spirit. You can hear how the word appearance sounds like apparition. That's where it comes from. And so an appearance of any spirit would be an apparition. Now, if the spirit comes from heaven, then the spirit doesn't need masses said for it. And so it wouldn't ask for them. If a soul is from hell, and Aquinas thought that souls from hell can occasionally manifest to human beings, then masses won't help it, and it presumably wouldn't ask for them either. It's only if they're in that middle category of souls from purgatory that they would ask for masses to be said. But why don't they all do that? Well, Martin Luther, the famous Protestant reformer, had a very interesting opinion on that. People may not know this, but he apparently coined the term poltergeist. In German, poltern means noisy or rattling, and Geist means ghost or spirit. And so a poltergeist is a noisy ghost or a noisy spirit. And this word appears for the first time in German in Martin Luther's writings. Now, historically, for people who may not be familiar, a poltergeist is what happens when you have unusual object motion, like, books are flying around, people hear bangs and thumps, There may be weird things happening with water or fire or things like that. And historically, it was commonly assumed that a spirit was involved, since they couldn't see any living human agent producing this activity. It was assumed it must be a spirit. In the mid 20th century, though, another theory developed in parapsychology that explains poltergeists, or many poltergeists, as not actually being due to a departed spirit, but to a living human who is basically under stress, and they don't feel they can vent their frustrations openly, so their subconscious kinds of throws a psychokinetic temper tantrum. And there are ways, if that's the case, which appears to be what's going on in many poltergeist instances, though not all of them, there are ways of helping that person out, like getting stress management help can cause the poltergeist activity to subside, which is evidence that in this case, the poltergeist activity was produced by a living person. But that was, 400 years after Martin Luther. Back then, he assumed that it's a spirit that's involved. And his question was, well, what kind of spirit is it? And he had a very interesting argument. He said that all poltergeists must be deceptive spirits. And the reason was, the first thing they do is ask Mass to be said for them. And Martin Luther was not a fan of the Catholic Mass. So he took the fact that so many poltergeists asked for Mass to be said as evidence that they must be deceptive spirits, not on God's team. So that was Martin Luther's argument. I would say, while it's an interesting argument, it's a load of fetid dingo's kidneys. Now, having said that, let's approach Philip's question directly in a Catholic context. Why don't all ghosts ask for masses to be said for them? And there are a number of possibilities. I mentioned two: the ghost might already be in heaven, or it might be someone manifesting from hell. But assuming they're in purgatory, why don't they ask for mass to be said for them in every case? Well, Psychelet,
yes,
you're not in heaven yet, or hell. So mass could be a benefit to you. Do you ask every person you meet to have mass said for you?
It had not even occurred to me, Jimmy. It had not even occurred to me.
Okay, so why doesn't it occur to you to ask everyone you meet to have mass said for you?
I don't know. It just never did. I don't know. And no one ever suggested that as a course of action. I never thought of it.
Let me make a suggestion.
Okay.
You have other more pressing matters to talk to other people about besides, could you have mass said for me?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And if that's true of you, because you're not in heaven or hell yet, the same thing could be true of a soul that's in purgatory. They may have more pressing things they need to deal with at the moment. For example, their relatives who are still alive may be really broken up about their loss, and the soul in purgatory may judge that it is more important in this moment to assure my loved ones on earth that I'm okay, that they don't need to worry about me being eternally lost. And so they may take the opportunity to assure them of that. On the other hand, they may have unfinished business on earth, like maybe they wronged somebody and they need to put that right. In fact, putting that right may even be part of their purgation in purgatory. So rather than asking for mass to be said, they may say, hey, I did you wrong, I apologize. And that may be part of their purgation. So even though mass is very valuable, and we should definitely have mass said for people who have died, in a given moment, it may not be the most pressing urgency. And so we shouldn't assume a simplistic model of what's going to help a particular ghost the most in a particular moment. They may have other things they need to clear away, for example, in order to have the Mass have its full benefit for them. And frankly, even though obviously the sacrifice of Christ is infinite in value and thus in principle is enough to deal with any person's problems, and you might think that therefore having Mass said for someone is going to be the most pressing thing in all cases, well, that would be true in this life as well. And yet God indicates, and human experience indicates, that in this life, it's often not the most pressing thing we need to do for someone in this life. And the same could therefore be true of someone who's in purgatory in the next life. But as Father Martin Luther assured us, lots of ghosts do ask for Masses to be said for them.
So many that we can that we have to have some response for why they are. Jimmy Akin is our guest. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Happy Halloween to you. It is All Hallows Eve, and we've got a lot more weird questions for Jimmy coming right up.
Catch Catholic Answers live anytime at Catholic.com.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Beyond Damascus with Dan DeMatte and Aaron Richards is our show for young adults.
Everybody's talking about encounter. Everybody's talking about that mountaintop experience. What we fail to often talk about is what happens after, what happens beyond that Damascus moment.
Jesus Christ is calling all of us to be missionary disciples, disciples of Jesus who are on mission to bring the kingdom of God here and now on this earth.
Beyond Damascus with Dan DeMatte and Aaron Richards, tomorrow at 8 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Jimmy Akin is our guest, and it's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. It's a Friday. It's Halloween. Now, what I usually say on Halloween is, because it's the Feast of All Hallows that follows, it's All Saints' Day tomorrow, but I think that has been moved to Sunday, the celebration of it, but I could be wrong about that. I probably should have looked it up before. I just thought of it just now because I was about to say, hey, tomorrow is All Saints' Day. I'll tell you what, I'll look it up at the break and I'll let you know when we're celebrating All Saints' Day this year. I'm not exactly sure when that is because it's on a Saturday, of course. So it may have been moved to the Sunday. Jimmy Akin, the author of a whole bunch of books, including The Bible is a Catholic Book and A Daily Defense, 365 Days plus one to Becoming a Better Apologist, here to take questions. And all the questions are in, and we gather them up. If they're weird enough, we ask Jimmy. And this one comes from Jim.
Actually, before we do that, let's answer the question you just raised.
Oh, okay.
Which was what's going on with the Feast of All Saints. And according to the U.S. Bishop's Complementary Norms, which are easy to find if you type in U.S. Complementary Norms, whenever January 1st, the Solemnity of Mary, Mother of God, or August 15th, the Solemnity of the Assumption, or November 1st, the Solemnity of All Saints falls on a Saturday or on a Monday, the precept to attend Mass is abrogated. So it's not transferred. It's just not a holy day of obligation.
Ah, okay. All right. So it's just not a holy day of obligation. Very helpful. Thank you, Jimmy. I appreciate that. I realized I started talking and didn't know the answer once I started talking. But this one comes from Jim. Why, Jimmy, in your opinion, would God allow hauntings, which act as non-interactive recording or psychic imprint, which seems to repeat over and over again in the same place and may even be left by people who are still alive, as opposed to singularly unique and interactive apparitions of the dead?
Okay, so I want to compliment Jim for knowing the meaning of the term haunting in its more academic sense. In colloquial English speech, a haunting is the same thing as an apparition. It's when a ghost is appearing. But in parapsychology, there's been a good bit of research done about certain types of phenomena known as hauntings, where it appears that the same thing just happens over and over again. Like you see a person descending a staircase every day at 3 p.m. And that's all that ever happens. If you wave at the person or say hi to the person or yell to the person, they just walk down the staircase. They don't acknowledge you at all. So this acts as if it's some kind of recording. It's not interactive. You can't hold a conversation with it. And consequently, parapsychologists have proposed, well, that's what it is then. If it acts like a recording, then it is a recording. So we don't have evidence here of an interactive spirit. We have evidence that some kind of imprint was or place memory was left in this location, and we're just picking up on that memory. And this is the common parapsychological understanding of what a haunting is. Sometimes they are called residual hauntings to indicate that they're caused by some kind of like psychic residue that has been left in a location rather than being due to the presence of a spirit. And Jim is correct that they are left by living people. They are, because, it's living people that leave recordings. If you watch the movie Top Hat from the 1930s with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, that's a recording, but Fred and Ginger recorded it when they were still alive. And you could watch that movie for many years while they were still alive. So the person that created the haunting may or may not still be alive at the time you're experiencing the haunting. And, this is just one form of ways that people can leave imprints in their environment. For example, Cy Kellett,
yes.
You live in San Diego,
right?
And that's on the left-hand side of America, and in more ways than one. And one of the things about San Diego is its beach community. And
right.
So you have beaches there. Do you ever go down to the beach, Cy Kellett?
Yes, quite frequently.
Okay.
Sure.
So when you go down to the beach, do you walk along the beach?
Yes.
And when you walk along the beach, do you leave footprints?
I do. Yes.
Good.
I have
You're
noticed
not a ghost. You're not a ghost
right.
then.
And I can see myself in a mirror too. So I feel pretty solid.
That's vampires. That's different.
Okay.
Okay. So you leave footprints on the beach, and thus you leave traces in your environment that indicate your presence. Those footprints are a record of the steps that you took on the beach. And if someone comes along and sees those footprints, is there a possibility you're still alive?
I thus far, every time I've been still alive. Yes, so far.
So far. So this is like the haunting experience, and I'm glad that I would think that you would still be alive, since the tide comes in every day, and therefore it'll wipe out those footprints before too long. So at any event, you leave a record in your environment without intending to or trying to, just like someone in a residual haunting would. Now, let me ask you, Cy Kellett, why would God allow you to leave footprints on the beach as opposed to people just having interactions with you after you're dead?
That's just the way the world works. I don't even know how to answer that question.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just how things are. Like,
you
can leave marks on stuff.
That's my answer too.
Good.
In regard to Jim Jameson's question, this is just how God set it up. We can leave records in our environment while we're alive, and they can continue to exist while we're alive. And therefore, there's not a binary choice between this and merely having interactions with us after our deaths. So we make records all the time. Footprints in sand, footprints in snow. You lay down, you make a snow angel. That's a record. You press record on a voice recorder. It makes a record of your voice. Someone points a video camera at you. It makes a record of you on video. Right now, you and I are doing a live stream, and that's a record of us having this conversation. So God just set up the world so that people can leave records in the world while they're still alive. And that applies apparently to what parapsychologists call hauntings too. They're just one more kind of record we can leave in the world.
Jim, thank you very much. I think I had heard you talk about that kind of record before, but I had forgotten about that there are hauntings that aren't actually a spirit hanging around. There's some other kind of thing. Again, Jim, thank you very much. This one comes from Jordan, who wants to know, what are the moral implications of using new technologies in the workplace, knowing that it could lead to other positions becoming obsolete and other employees being laid off? Example, someone needs to use AI or other forms of automation to meet the requirements of their job, but too much success could convince a CEO to completely replace another human position with technology.
Okay, so Jordan has asked a general question, which is about the moral implications of using technology in the workplace, knowing that it could lead to other positions becoming obsolete. He gives the current situation with AI being introduced as an example of that, but he's perceptively noticed that there's a more general question here that doesn't just apply to AI, it applies to any kind of new technology. So let's think about this a little bit. Now, currently, we have lots of people who use computers as part of their daily jobs. Did any of those jobs exist 50 years ago?
No.
So there were non-computer users who were employed prior to the introduction of computers into the modern workplace. And you go back a couple hundred years, and over in that period of time, we had the industrial age, where you started having manufacturing beginning to use identical parts. So not every part had to be custom made, and then goods were fashioned by putting together different identical parts. So like if you wanted to buy a gun, the gun would have parts that were molded, where you pour metal into molds and then you assemble the gun out of those parts. But Cykel, wouldn't that have put out of business all the people who handmade guns and the parts for guns prior to the Industrial Revolution?
Some of them, the ones that didn't learn the new way of doing things, probably. But
yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let's go back further. Now, of course, gun parts were commonly made out of, a lot of them were made out of iron and specifically steel, but let's just say iron. And the Iron Age began in different locations prior to, it varied, but let's say, in a few centuries BC was where the Iron Age started in a lot of places. So didn't the introduction of iron forging technology put out of business lots of people who had previously been part of the bronze economy during the Bronze Age?
It certainly did. I remember those days, Jimmy. It was awful.
And your memory may go back a little further because bronze technology, people had swords and knives and stuff made out of bronze, but those replaced knives and stuff that were made out of stone with the Stone Age. Right. So didn't all the new fancy bronze technology workers put people out of business in the Stone Age?
Fred, Barney, everybody out of business.
Yeah. A lot of those bronze workers also, some of them killed some of the previous Stone Age workers because they had better weapons. So we see that there has been, over the last several thousand years, a continual improvement of technologies, and each wave of technology, as it supersedes the previous economy, puts some folks out of business. And if we didn't allow that to happen, we would be stuck in the Stone Age. Now, Cy Kellett, question for you.
Yes.
Has it benefited mankind to not be stuck in the Stone Age?
I would say, in general, I've noticed some positive effects. Yes, generally, It's good not to be in the Stone Age.
So you would say it's fundamentally moral to allow technology to progress.
That's a great point.
Well, there's a little more to say, and I'll say it on the other side of the break.
Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's All Hallows Eve, also called Halloween. We'll come back with more right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
Throughout history, some Catholics have been among the worst kind of villains, right? Or were they? In Cancelled, historian Steve Weidenkopf digs into the lives and controversies of some of these Catholics whose reputations have been blackened, often unfairly. He takes on the anti-Catholic versions of history and defends not only these figures, but the faith they represent. Order your copy of Cancelled today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
When the resurrected Jesus appeared to disciples on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize him until the breaking of the bread. The same is true today. In the Holy Eucharist, we really meet Jesus. In The Eucharist is Really Jesus, author Joe Heschmeyer explains how knowing Jesus in the Eucharist is the key to understanding all of Christian faith. Order your copy of The Eucharist is Really Jesus today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. A lot of little people going to be out in the streets, so careful driving tonight. We're happy to have you here. Thanks for joining us for this afternoon or evening's broadcast, depending on where you are. Maybe even it's your morning broadcast if you're over in Australia or Singapore or the Philippines. Wherever you are, we're always happy when you join us. Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's Weird Questions. And Jordan had a question that Jimmy wants to get back to. He was in the midst of answering it. And Jordan was saying, is it immoral to use technologies at work that might eliminate somebody else's job at work?
Yeah. So before the break, we established that if we didn't allow newer technologies to displace older ones, that we'd still be back in the Stone Age. And Cy Kellett, you were of the opinion that it's a good thing we're not back in the Stone Age. And so it's fundamentally moral to allow new technologies to supplant older ones.
Yes.
But there can be some exceptions to that. Like if someone wants to introduce a particular technology that would be fundamentally harmful to mankind, well, then you don't want to introduce that technology. So we're not saying all technology is universally good, but as a general matter, allowing technology to progress is, even though it's going to mean some people are going to lose jobs or have to retrain or something like that, is fundamentally moral. The question is going to be how you implement the new technology, assuming that it's fundamentally a good technology that is moral to introduce to begin with. The question is, how do you introduce it? And here, I think Catholic moral theology would hold that the technology, to the extent possible, should be introduced in such a way that it minimizes problems for people. Like if you know you're going to lose lots of jobs because of a new technology, making sure there are other options for people, either other jobs they can get or their training programs so they can get up to speed with the new technology, or one way or another, if you can find ways to minimize the damage that's done through this process, which is known as creative destruction. Some jobs are destroyed, but it's due to added human creativity that ends up benefiting everybody. And so as part of this creative destruction, you want to minimize the destructive aspect of it. But that doesn't mean that you don't allow the technology to progress. It's just a question of how does it get introduced? How do you manage that transition? And how you manage it is going to depend on what the technology is, how rapidly it could be brought in, what alternatives exist in a particular society at the time. For example, can you afford programs to help people retrain and so forth? But fundamentally, as long as the technology itself is legitimate, then it can be introduced, even though it's going to mean some people are going to lose their jobs, but you need to try to manage that transition to minimize the harms that are being caused.
Jordan, thank you. A wonderful question for Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin today. Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. And on we go to Daniel's question. Does the phenomenon of dead bodies being incorruptible only happen to saints, or does it happen to non-Catholics as well?
Well, it can happen to non-Catholics, but it could happen to a non-Catholic saint. However, incorruptibility also happens to people who we don't have any evidence are saints, whether they're Catholic or not. So this is a phenomenon that is not associated exclusively with those who we have evidence are saints. And consequently, even though you often hear reports about someone's body who is being considered for sainthood was excavated or disinterred, and it was found to be incorrupt to one degree or another, you often hear about that, but it's not actually one of the criteria that the church uses in judging sainthood, not these days. There may have been a time when it was given more weight and was looked at as a possible miracle that could confirm someone's sainthood. But as knowledge has progressed, we've learned that actually this happens in quite a number of different circumstances. And so it has become decoupled from sainthood. And today the church does not use incorruptibility as evidence that someone is in fact in heaven. It may be something that God allows to happen as kind of a sign to the faithful, but he also allows it to occur in other circumstances as well.
All right. Daniel, thank you. Miguel wants to know this. Can you explore Catholic themes and spirituality in the Star Wars universe? The Chosen One, the Force, Jedi Order, symbolism, sacrifice of Vader, redemption, etc. I know George Lucas is hardly Catholic, but perhaps he unwittingly drew on things found in the largest entity in the universe, the Catholic Church. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.
Okay, well, Miguel, I'm not so much a Star Wars guy myself. I have seen all 9 of the films and some additional Star Wars material. I'm not an expert in them, but one of the things I do know is this was not an accident. George Lucas consciously modeled elements in the Star Wars universe off of religious ideas. One of the things he did, and he talked about this, was he used a cycle that is known as the hero's journey, which was described by Joseph Campbell, a 20th century scholar of folklore and religion, who was into looking at how do different stories manifest and in different cultures. And one of the things he proposed, I think it's an oversimplification, but he proposed that there's something he referred to as the monomyth, which he called the hero's journey. The idea of a monomyth is that it's the primal root myth that's at the basis of all other mythologies. And so you have this story where you have a hero. He doesn't start out necessarily functioning as a hero. He's a member of a community. And then something happens to cause him to leave that community, and he is invited into a larger world where he then goes on a journey that involves growth and development, and he ends up winning some kind of benefit. Or set of benefits. It could be skills, it could be magical items, it could be any number of things, but he ends up returning to his community as a hero and is able to bestow benefits as a result of the journey he's been on. And if you think about this story, it has, and it according to Campbell, not every element of this story appears every time it's told, but you can see this story in a lot of this pattern in a lot of other stories. Like, for example, Jesus Christ. He's born as a little baby. He grows, he matures, he's called to his ministry. He ends up conquering death on the cross and is able to return and bestow benefits on his followers. So Joseph Campbell, at least, would say that the hero's journey is reflected in the life story of Jesus Christ. It's also reflected in lots of other life stories, including Luke Skywalker. He's initially a farm boy on Tatooine. He's invited into a larger world by Obi-Wan Kenobi. He goes on this journey of growth, and he ends up destroying the Death Star and returning as a triumphant hero who has bestowed benefits on his community by destroying the Death Star. So this is basic drama. And even though I think Campbell, if you propose this as a true monomyth, I think that that's probably an oversimplification, but there is this basic story that you see in lots of drama. And George Lucas consciously adopted the hero's journey for the first Star Wars and more broadly across the Star Wars franchise. He also modeled specific things off religious elements. Not only is Luke Skywalker a Jesus Christ figure, but Anakin Skywalker also has parallels to Jesus Christ. He's not identical. I mean, he goes to the dark side. He gives in to the temptations that he's offered. But notice he's even born of a virgin. And because his mother did not have relations with a man, and yet she, due to a virgins in the Force, she became pregnant and gave birth to Anakin Skywalker. We also have prominent themes of redemption here. We also have the Jedi Knights are basically a monastic order. They're like kind of like the Knights Templar. They have both a military side and they have a spiritual side. And they're also celibate. At least that's the way it's presented in the prequels. And Anakin, part of his given into temptation involves his attraction to Padme Skywalker, where that's part of his literal and physical seduction to the dark side. That's the initial stage of it, which is then leveraged by Emperor Palpatine to get him to fully commit to the dark side. So we have lots of this stuff. And of course, we have the Force itself. Miguel closed his question by saying, thanks and may the Force be with you. Psychelet, do you happen to know where the may the Force be with you comes from?
It sounds so much like peace be with you from the Catholic Mass.
Pretty close. What it actually comes from is may the Lord be with you.
Oh yeah, of course. Oh yeah, that's even closer. Yeah.
And that's where George Lucas took it from. He took it from the Christian liturgy. He took may the Lord be with you and changed the Lord to the Force. And the Force, even though it's articulated in different science fiction-y ways and different Star Wars properties, fundamentally it's a symbol of God, of the unknown. Now, it also can incorporate a dark side that's a symbol of evil, but when the Force is used correctly, it's a symbol of God. And all of this was conscious. Lucas has talked about this in interviews going back decades. And so he very definitely was using religious symbolism in his construction of the Star Wars universe. Unfortunately, that didn't stop the sequel trilogy from being made. Because that's just blasphemy.
Miguel, thanks very much for the question. I think I better take a break, then we'll come back with some more weird questions on this Halloween afternoon for Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley of the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul, and that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come? At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
Mother Angelica had a simple goal when she began EWTN: to reach the world with the gospel message. EWTN is the most trusted source of authentically Catholic content on the air today, featuring Mother Angelica, Dr. Greg and Lisa Popchek, and Raymond Arroyo. We've never wavered from our mandate to proclaim the truth and majesty of the Catholic faith. Thank you for joining EWTN in this mission.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Tons and tons of weird questions for this Halloween afternoon. Glad you're here with us. This next one comes from My Home TD6SV.
Mm-hmm.
And My Home TD6SV wants to know, are mine and my husband's guardian angels friends? Is my guardian angel friends with my children's angels? Or is my angel like a mentor to my children's angels?
Okay, so let's deal with the first two questions because they're going to have a common answer. And the answer is going to depend on what you mean by friend. The concept of friendship can be understood in more than one way. It could mean someone you have positive relations with. And so anyone you have positive relations with, could be considered your friend. On the other hand, it could mean having special positive relations with them. You feel you may have positive relations with lots of people, but those you consider your friends are those you have especially positive relations with. So you can use the word friend in different senses. In the broad sense of just someone you have positive relations with, I would say it's fair to say that all of the angels connected with your family, whether they're yours, your husband's, or your children's, all of them have positive relations with each other. And so they're all friends in that sense. The question would be, do they have special positive relations with each other compared to other angels, so that they're friends in the more special sense of friendship? And on that one, I can't answer as confidently, but it seems to me that since they're working to protect the same group of people that is bound by positive relations to each other within your family, or at least what should be positive relations, I would suspect since these angels are working on the same team to protect the same human team, namely your family, it would be reasonable to propose that at least right now, while they're guarding y'all, they do have special positive relations with each other compared to, say, a family, a group of angels that's protecting a family on the far side of the planet that you don't know. So I think it's a reasonable conjecture. I think it's certain they all are friends in the sense of they have positive relations with each other. And I think it's a reasonable conjecture to propose that because they're bound together working towards the same goal in protecting your family members, that they're also currently friends in a more special sense than that. But that's more speculative. When it comes to the third question, is your angel like a mentor to your children's angels? I would say, I would give a different answer. I would say, I don't know, but probably not. Because while there is a natural law hierarchy among humans that includes your family, so that you and your husband are the leaders in your family, and the children are the followers because they're younger and they're still growing and still maturing and don't know as much as you and your husband, none of that applies to the angels. In the first place, the angel's job is to get these individual people they're assigned to heaven and to protect them. And that doesn't require any kind of natural law hierarchy among the angels that are protecting your family. Also, angels do not grow and develop the way humans do. So it's not like you've got child angels assigned to, angels don't reproduce. So it's not like you've got child angels assigned to your children and adult angels assigned to you and your husband. So there's not a natural hierarchy in the angelic community that mirrors the hierarchy of the human family so far as we know. If there were such a hierarchy, it would have to be different in some ways than the human family because, as I said, angels don't reproduce. So I think it's fair to say your angels are all friends, maybe in a special sense, but I probably wouldn't ascribe mentorship to your angel or your husband's angel compared to your children's angels.
My Home, TD6SV. Thank you very much for the question. Jimmy Akin, our guest. It's weird questions for Jimmy, and we'll continue with another guardian angel question. Teresa wants to know this, Jimmy. Mm-hmm. If one's guardian angel were asked to console Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane, would the angel be allowed to do it?
Okay, I assume that Teresa is asking, like, if today you asked your guardian angel to console Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane, well, you can certainly make that request, whether you make it directly to the angel or whether you make it to God and say, could you have my guardian angel console Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane? And the fact that Christ was in the Garden of Gethsemane, 2,000 years ago, that's not a barrier, because God is outside of time, and so he can respond to your question, to your request, at any moment in the course of history. Also, and I find this can help some people grasp this a little better. Even if God were not outside of time, and he is, but even if he were not, he's still omniscient. He knows everything. So back in AD 33, when Christ was in the Garden of Gethsemane, God knew in AD 33, even though he's not really in time, but he would have known in AD 33 that in 2025, you were going to ask your guardian angel to do this. So he would foresee your request and thus could act on it in AD 33, even if he was not outside of time, which he is. So how likely is it that that this request would be granted? There, I don't think we know. We don't know what consolations God permitted Jesus to have in the Garden of Gethsemane. We also don't know what angels were permitted to do with respect to him. We know there was at least one angel there because we're told that, but we don't know if there were, all of the angels trying to comfort him, or where, if God may have imposed limits we don't know about. Now, I don't think one of those limits would be a physical limit. If you imagine, let's say, okay, there's 100 billion people in the history who've been born in the history of the world. Well, if all of their guardian angels chose to try to console Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane, and that's something the angels would want to do, whether you ask them to or not, they would want Jesus to be consoled. Well, then that would be 100 billion angels and trying to console Jesus. And if you try to imagine that, and if you imagine angels having physical bodies, how do you get 100 billion in one little garden? That doesn't make sense. But the fact is, angels do not have physical bodies. And so I don't think there would be a physical limitation on the angels on that number of angels being able to console Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. I think it more likely that God would impose other limitations on what the angels could do. For example, Psychelid.
Yes.
If you've got 100 billion angels consoling you,
yes,
I would say that involves quite a lot of consolation, right?
Yes, that's a lot of consolation. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So there's 100 billion angels wanting to console Jesus, but God doesn't want Jesus to consoled. He wants him to go to the cross and not just be blissed out and happy and everything like that. He's allowing his son to suffer in order to redeem us. And so my suspicion is God would have imposed a limit on the angelic consolation that Jesus might receive based on the fact that Jesus needs to suffer in this situation. And so I would say that fundamentally the answer to the question, can you ask for your guardian angel to console Jesus in the garden? You can ask, but I would say you got to leave it up to God after that. There may be limits, some of which humans may not even be capable of understanding, that would prevent that from happening. Although I think we can feel confident that God and the angels would want Jesus to be consoled within the boundaries that needed to happen in that situation.
Teresa, thank you very much. A couple of guardian angel questions. Jimmy Akin is our guest. You want to take the next?
They were new guardian angel questions. They weren't.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually, the most common guardian angel question is, what happens to my guardian angel when I die? I think.
And they didn't ask that.
Yeah, they have to report to their superior on all all that you did and didn't do. What's on the Jimmy Akin podcast this week, Jimmy? Every Monday we get the Jimmy Akin podcast. So what did we get this Monday?
So this Monday I had an episode on the synoptic problem. The synoptic gospels are Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and there's a clear relationship between them. And the question is, what is that relationship? So I went through some of the most commonly proposed explanations for how they might be related. I mentioned the one that I tend to favor, and in a future episode, I'll explain why I favor it. But this episode was all about explaining the synoptic problem in general and what some of the major options are. On this coming Monday, I'm going to be talking about the Bible Codex, which is a mystery that we haven't fully solved.
Oh, man. That was a terrible cliffhanger. I had follow-ups. All right, we'll just have to leave it there. You can check out the Jimmy Akin podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check out Jimmy's channel on YouTube. We talked a little earlier about Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, the Jimmy Akin podcast, and lots of other stuff.
You're mastering that internet lingo, channel rather than page.
I'm not mastering it. I'm trying to master it. But man, I need some mentorship. I need a little guardian angel mentorship. Right back with more weird questions for Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. It's Halloween, so careful out there. Pay attention. Slow down, especially if you're a young driver. Young drivers, that's always like, go slower than you think you have to. Well, not all. Some young drivers are so careful and cautious, but if you're like me, give it an extra 10 miles slower than you think. You're going to get home all right. Won't have any trouble bumping into a ghost or a goblin on the way home. Jimmy Akin is our guest for this Halloween show, and it's weird questions for Jimmy Akin. And there is an endless supply of weird questions for Jimmy Akin. I believe we could go forever, and there would be an endless supply of weird questions. Jimmy, thanks for coming back. Yeah.
Cy Kellett, I want to compliment you on your extra Halloweeny spooky home studio there.
Come on, Jimmy. It's because my lighting is not quite right here in the home studio. We've got the super black background.
In the wide shot,
bright.
It's even orangey with that light you got.
Oh,
there.
with that light there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know, but at least I didn't put a pumpkin face in here. Actually, the wall is covered with black cats that have been cut out of crepe paper, but you just can't tell because the wall is black. So it's actually beautifully decorated for Halloween, but it's textural, not visual. Yeah, if you could feel it, you'd know. I'm trying so hard. I'm fighting the urge to give out the number because all the questions are in already. We've got a bunch of weird questions for Jimmy in, and I want to get to one because I'm kind of glad we're starting off with this one. I feel like with this name, you say Basil. I feel like if it's a spice, you say basil, and if it's a person, you say Basil.
Well,
do you have any?
There was Basil Fawlty.
Yeah, and Basil Rathbone. Like I feel like Basil is how you say it if it's a person.
I just watched Basil Rathbone in some movies recently.
Some spooky old movies?
Well, one of them was, depending on how you count them, maybe more than one. I've watched multiple Basil Rathbone Sherlock Holmes movies.
Oh, yes, right.
But then I also watched Son of Frankenstein. And he plays Wolf Frankenstein, the title character, the son of Frankenstein in that.
Is that one of the old Universal Frankenstein movies?
The second Frankenstein movie.
Yeah.
The third Frankenstein movie. The second is Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah. With the hairdo. One of the greatest hairdos. That and Marge Simpson, the two greatest hairdos of the media age. All right. I want to get to this question from Basil then. Not Basil, Basil. Is prayer similar to telepathy? Do the saints in heaven communicate telepathically?
Okay. So let's deal with the first question first. Is prayer similar to telepathy? And here we need to distinguish between two different types of prayer, because there is mental prayer, where you say the prayer in your mind only, and there's what you could call physical prayer, where you also articulate it using your vocal tract. So if you say the Lord's Prayer out loud, that would be what we're at the moment calling physical prayer. But if you say the Lord's Prayer in your mind only, then it would be mental prayer. Okay, so let's talk about, now that we have that distinction in place, let's talk about telepathy. Telepathy is one of the three forms of extrasensory perception, or ESP. Now, let's talk about extrasensory perception. Extrasensory perception is the acquisition of information without using the physical senses. Okay, that's why it's called extrasensory perception. In Latin, extra means outside of. It does not mean in addition to. It means outside of. And so extrasensory perception is perception outside the senses, meaning the physical senses. So if you're acquiring information without using your physical senses, that's extrasensory perception. Now, Cy Kellett,
yes.
Apart from the incarnation, does God have physical senses?
No.
I mean, does he have eyeballs or smell or anything like that?
Nope.
Okay, so if God gets information, it by definition on God's part is extrasensory, because he doesn't have physical senses. So right there, that tells you that God's using ESP if he's hearing our prayers. Now, there's also another option philosophically that, maybe he knows them, because he causes them. But even that is, and so he just knows them by his own nature. But even that does not involve the physical senses. And so that would be the extrasensory perception of, that would be the extrasensory possession of knowledge. Now, let's think about the types of ESP that exist. And parapsychologists have identified 3 major types. The first type is what's sometimes called clairvoyance. Clairvoyance is getting information in real time about a distant or hidden location without the physical senses. So remote viewing is an example of this. But the basic idea is you're getting information about a place. It's maybe a distant place that your physical senses don't reach, or it may be a hidden place that your physical senses don't reach. But one way or another, it's your mind is getting information about a place. So you can think of clairvoyance as mind to place contact. Then there's precognition, where you get information about the future. And the future is a time. So this would be mind to time contact. So we've got mind to place contact for clairvoyance and mind to time contact for precognition. And it doesn't have to be the future. It can also be the past. Sometimes that's called retrocognition. It's also just sometimes lumped together with precognition because it looks like the same ability. They're just pointed into different times. Then there's telepathy, where you get information about what another person is thinking or feeling without using the physical senses. And you can think of that as mind to mind contact. So we've got the 3 forms of ESP: mind to place contact or clairvoyance, mind to time contact or precognition, and mind to mind contact or telepathy. So let's think about when you, Cy Kellett, say the Lord's Prayer in your head.
Okay.
Only. You have it go. You have the Lord's Prayer in your mind, and God knows about it, right?
Yes.
So you have mind to mind contact with God. He knows what your mind is thinking, correct?
Yes.
So prayer in this case is not only like or similar to telepathy, as Basil asks, it is telepathy.
Aha.
Under this definition.
Right.
What about if you say the Lord's Prayer out loud? Well, if you say it out loud, God, he's omniscient. He's going to know you're saying it out loud. But once again, is God getting that information through physical senses?
No.
So it's still telepathy. So when you're praying to God, it's always telepathy, based on this very simple, broad definition of telepathy. With that, that doesn't presuppose how the telepathy works or anything like that. What about the saints in heaven? Basil asked. Do they communicate telepathically? Well, that's going to depend on your theory of how they communicate. And one of the things that medieval Christian thinkers like St. Thomas Aquinas and others did was use angels as a model for what the disembodied human soul can do, because angels are by nature disembodied spirits. And so they're disembodied intellects. And so if you can figure out what an angel can do, then you can figure out in principle that a disembodied human intellect might be able to do the same kind of stuff. And so medieval thinkers used angelic intellects as a model for what disembodied human intellects can do. So do we have evidence, Cy Kellett, from Scripture of angels being able to communicate with each other?
Yes, absolutely. We do.
Yeah, we do. For example, in the book of Daniel, Gabriel shows up and relates how he and St. Michael have been coordinating a fight against the demonic prince of Persia together. And that would suggest that they can communicate. We have other evidence too, but that'll suffice. So it would seem that angels can communicate, And in doing that, angels only are intellects. They don't have physical bodies, so they don't have physical senses. So any communication that angels have with each other must also be telepathic. And here we come to an interesting fork in the road, because there's more than one kind of telepathy. One form of telepathy would involve broadcasting your mind to another person. Okay. The other would involve just knowing what another person is thinking, even though they're not trying to broadcast it to you. So if someone has to think and say, Psychelet, get the message, pick up Bart, pick up Bart. And you hear that, however, incoherently. I mean, you might not pick it up perfectly. I'm saying pick up Bart, and you might hear it as pick up Bart. What does that mean? But you still heard it. I was broadcasting it to you. On the other hand, if I'm just sitting here at home thinking, oh, I bet Psychelet wants pizza right now, and you just know that without me trying to send it to you, then that would be the more kind of receptive telepathy.
Yeah.
Now here we come to a difference between what St. Thomas Aquinas thought and what some others have said. Aquinas picked up on a particular, and he wasn't the only one, but he picked up on a particular verse in the Old Testament that says God knows the heart. And the implication is other people don't know the heart. And so Aquinas thought that the receptive telepathy, where there's no one's trying to broadcast it, he thought that doesn't happen, that only God has receptive telepathy. And so he said that in order for one angel to communicate with another, the angel had to broadcast its mind or reveal its mind to the other angel. So he believed that angels had broadcast telepathy, but not receptive telepathy. Personally, I am utterly unconvinced by the argument that he proposed for this. The reason is that I don't think he and the other people who took this verse the same way are recognizing the literary context and what the biblical author was trying to say. The biblical author was not addressing the question of, do angels know each other's minds? The biblical author was making a point about humans, and humans generally do not know each other's hearts. But that's not to say they never do. It's just in contrast to God, they don't have the same kind of knowledge of each other's hearts that God has. And so I think that and furthermore, there hadn't been research done into telepathy in when the biblical author was writing. So I think they're stretching the text beyond its what you can reasonably infer from it. Just like you shouldn't try to get other scientific lessons from the biblical text, which is not trying to answer scientific questions. And in fact, once parapsychology did develop as a science, we got evidence that the receptive form of telepathy does exist with humans, that there are situations where no one's trying to broadcast to you, but you may still know, my child is in terrible danger, I have to rush out and save them, even though the child was not trying to broadcast to you that they were in terrible danger. So I think I don't find the argument that angels only have broadcast telepathy persuasive. I think both humans and we have evidence that both humans and angels can have the more receptive form of telepathy. So I would say angels in heaven do communicate via telepathy, however you conceive that, on the broadcast only model or on the two-way model. When it comes to humans, I would say the same thing. I think humans in heaven communicate telepathically. And I would say we have it, since in this life we have evidence that humans can do two-way telepathy, that rather than just broadcast telepathy, I would say that saints in heaven can do that as well. That's my opinion. That's not a fact, but that would be my opinion based on the evidence we have.
Basil, thank you so much. What a fun and interesting question for Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. We got to take our first break this hour, but we'll be right back with more Weird Questions for Jimmy on this Halloween on Catholic Answers Live.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church. On the web at magnificat.com.
Another great podcast on EWTN Podcast Central is Restless. It's 4 zany Catholic young adults seeking God in the midst of this crazy mixed-up world. They discuss life, relationships, work, fun, and everything else in our world through the lens of our Catholic faith. You can hear this and other faith-filled podcasts from our friends and affiliates around the world at EWTN Podcast Central. Visit EWTN.com/radio and click on Podcast Central today.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest. And it's Weird Questions for Jimmy Akin today. We've got a whole bunch of weird questions for Jimmy. Jimmy Akin, of course, is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. He has one of the most listened to documentary podcasts anywhere, and that's Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. And now he's got a second podcast, the Jimmy Akin Podcast, growing in popularity. And then he does our show, and he does a bunch of other people's shows, and he also answers people's email and does work. So I don't know how he does all of that. And occasionally he comes out with a new book. So, are you working on anything? Got any books?
No, I was working on it mere minutes before we came on live today. Oh. So yes, I do.
And any hint what it's about, or are you one of those authors doesn't talk about it until
it's about religion?
Okay. All right. Well, in the general sense, then I know what it's about.
It's about a teacher of strange things.
Oh, I know that guy. That would be Jesus. Yeah. All right. Back to the weird questions we go. Brianna wants to know, human beings have no memory of their time as infants or their time while in the womb.
Not usually.
Is it possible that during these times, God has the ability to communicate with human beings and they can understand and respond? Or if certain things about our lives were revealed to us, but once we cross a certain threshold in time or development, we can no longer remember these things?
Okay, so Brianna has asked a question of the form, is it possible that God can do X?
Yep.
Specifically, she says, is it possible God has the ability? And then she fills out what the ability she's interested in is. Cy Kellett.
Yes, Jimmy, I know where we're going. Yeah, go ahead.
Every question that can be placed in the form, is it possible that God can do X, has a presumptive answer.
Yes, it does.
What is that presumptive answer?
Yes, he can.
Yes, he can, because God is omnipotent and therefore can do anything that is logically possible. So the only way that a question of the form, is it possible that God could do X, would have the answer no, is if whatever X is involves a logical contradiction. So let's look at Brianna's question. She wants to know if it's possible that God has the ability to communicate with human beings in the womb and that they can understand and respond. Cy Kellett, does that proposition involve a logical contradiction?
None that I can spot, no.
Okay. And she then says, if certain things about our lives were revealed to us, I assume she means in the womb, but once we cross a certain threshold in time or development, we can no longer remember these things. Does that idea that we once had some things revealed to us that we can no longer remember, does that involve a logical contradiction?
Nope.
No. So I would say both of these are possible. It's possible that God could communicate with people in the womb. They could understand and respond, but then after a certain point, they cross a threshold and can no longer remember those things. So I would say, yeah, all that's possible. The question I would have is, what evidence do we have that this is the case? And of course, it's hypothetically possible that that we have no such evidence, because this scenario involves us forgetting the information. So we wouldn't, on this scenario, we wouldn't remember the things God had revealed to us, and therefore it would not be it would not be something that we could falsify, which would mean this is not a question. And well, I'm not going to pull science into it, although I'm tempted to, because falsifiability and science are very closely related. But it's possible that this is an unfalsifiable situation, at least directly, unless God told us that he revealed stuff to us that we then forgot. And notice, he doesn't have to be the one causing us to forget. We could forget for other reasons, like as part of our developmental process. In fact, there's a concept we may get to later called childhood amnesia, where we forget stuff. But unless God told us that he had done this, we wouldn't have knowledge of this. Also, it could be possible that maybe the forgetting process isn't 100% bulletproof. Maybe some people do remember things that God had revealed to them when they were still in the womb. So I'm not close to I think it's possible that this could happen. I would just want to see evidence that it happens. I don't have any evidence that God has told us this happens, although I haven't done a survey of looking for it. I know it's not in the Bible, but it could be in private revelations. I know there are some people who claim to remember things from when they were in the womb, but thus far I don't know that I don't know what I think about those, because like a lot of the claims involve hypnotic regression, and hypnotic regression is not actually a good memory booster. It promotes confabulation. And so if the evidence for people knowing stuff when they were in the womb is merely derived from hypnotic regression, I'm not going to give it a lot of credence. I would want to see more evidence, but in principle, I'm open to this as a possibility.
Brianna, thank you very much. RoboSquid 2518 is next, and RoboSquid wants to know this: if you could go back in time to any time period, what event would you try to change the outcome of, and how would you do it, assuming that changing the past is possible?
Well, this is a really difficult question for me to answer, because I can my first impulse is to say I want to do the most good possible, and so I could say, well, I would want to go back to the fall of mankind and stop Adam and Eve from falling. Okay, how would I do that? Well, I don't know exactly. It would depend on the tools I had. Like, could I even speak the same language as them? Exactly. The historical reality that corresponds to Genesis 3 is something that involves symbolism, which the church has acknowledged. So at least some elements of it are symbolic. And so I'd have to see what's the situation on the ground when I got there. But assuming that I had the ability to change the past, that would kind of be my first guess. Problem. Psychella, you may be aware of a line in the church's liturgy on a certain day of the year that refers to the fall of man as Felix culpa.
Yes, oh, happy fault.
Oh, happy fault, right. Why do you think they call it that?
That brought us such a great Savior.
And a greater destiny than the one we would have had if we had stayed in the garden.
Right.
And so in terms of the church's liturgy conceptualizes the fall of man as a net positive, that it, even though it definitely involved a lot of bad stuff, namely all of the moral evil and a lot of the physical evil in the world's history, it nevertheless is a net positive because God is going to bring a greater good out of it. So this teaches us the law of unintended consequences. And so that makes me say, even though my first instinct would be to go right to the root of the problem and change the fall of man, maybe I shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And so that opens the door to a principle we're going to talk more about on the other side of the break.
All right. Hang on, Robo Squid, if you can. More coming up on time travel with Jimmy Akin. It's Weird Questions on Catholic Answers Live. Have you ever wondered about the mysterious, even obscure aspects of the Catholic faith? Dive into the Jimmy Akin podcast, where Jimmy brings together information from many fields as he pushes the boundaries of apologetics. Tune in today to the Jimmy Akin podcast, Mysteries of the Faith, a highly entertaining, informative, and at times humorous show that will help you grow in your faith. Visit JimmyAkinPodcast.com today to subscribe.
Lots of people have big questions about Catholicism. It needs a big book of answers, and now it's got one. The Big Book of Catholic Answers is filled with helpful replies to more than 250 questions about the faith. Questions about God, salvation history, the Creed, the Bible, the list goes on and on. Order your copy of the Big Book of Catholic Answers today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron. A little bit of groovy music there for you. I know Darren's just trying to butter me out, make me feel better, because we never got the weird questions music. Did you notice that, Jimmy? We didn't ever get any weird questions music
today. I didn't
today.
notice that. I like the groovy music, though. I also have a theory about where you are in your secret bunker.
Okay, where am I in my secret bunker, Jimmy?
I think you're in Collinwood. I think that you're in the Collinwood Mansion in Collinsport, Maine.
You think I'm a vampire? Is that what you think?
No, you're just surrounded by dark shadows.
Yes, I am surrounded by dark shadows today. I don't know what to say about it. It is a little spooky. I see myself and I think, let's cut from me to Jimmy. So let me go back to Robo Squid's question. He asked if you could change anything in history, what would you change? You said, well, you probably want to change the fall of Adam and Eve, but no, you wouldn't want to change that because a great good came from that great evil.
Yeah. So, I could propose any number of things, go back and change the Protestant Reformation, go back and change the Crusades, go back and change any number of things. But if you want to do the most good, my instinct would be go for the root cause of all the problems, which was the fall of man. Okay, but if it truly is a happy fault or felix culpa, then maybe I shouldn't do that. And the same thing is going to be true of any other application of the of trying to do the most good. You know, if I tried to change the Crusades, or if I tried to change the Protestant Reformation, who knows what would have happened? I mean, maybe if I stopped Martin Luther from launching the Protestant Reformation, Muslims conquer Europe. Or maybe if I change the outcome of the Crusades, you know, China invades the world and imposes a totalitarian. I mean, there's just no way to know. And so I'm not God. I don't see the big picture. What I do know is that God would, and the Catechism says this, is God would not allow an evil to exist if he wasn't going to bring about a greater good. So I can trust that even though history unfolded in ways that it contains some unfortunate things, the result is going to be greater than if those things had not been allowed to happen. And so who am I to change them? So I certainly wouldn't try the to do a greater good application of changing the past, which means I might, I still would need to consider some other things, like, maybe I would change something not for purposes of the greater good, but just for my own convenience, or my own preferences. Like if I had a cure for colon cancer, I certainly would be tempted to go back in time and give that to my wife before she died and save her life. On the other hand, my life would have taken a very different course. And like I said, I'm not God. I don't see the big picture. Even maybe God brought about a greater good through, among other things, one aspect of that greater good may be the fact that I have the career I do and I'm helping people in all over the world, that might not have happened if my life had assumed what I would have chosen. So I don't know that I would choose to change anything. On the other hand, and that's assuming that time change in the past is possible, which RoboSquid presupposed. He said, assuming that change in the past is possible. So if you ask me what would I change, I might be tempted to change something for my own personal preference, but I don't know that I actually would. I might not change anything. On the other hand, let's alter RoboSquid's question a bit. He presupposes I can go back to any time period and choose where I'm going and what I'm going to change. Let's change the first part of that. Let's say I just go back in time and I don't have control over where I am. Would I, in that circumstance, refrain from changing the past? Remember, we're assuming it's possible. Well, if I'm transported to before my lifetime and changing the past is possible, world history will alter. Because if I wasn't originally part of this timeline, let's say I transported back to the year 1600. So that's 400 years ago. Well, if I wasn't a part of the original timeline for 1600 and then you drop me into it, and then it's possible to change the past, and that's going to have ripple effects going forward. And in 400 years, the mere fact I existed in this new version of 1600 is going to spread out, and it's going to affect everything on the planet in 400 years. That means none of the people that I knew in 2025 in the original timeline are going to be born in the revised timeline. Oops. Because human identity is determined in part by the particular gametes that come together on the night a person is conceived. And even though women have only one gamete that's ready for a conception, men have hundreds of thousands of gametes that could be ready for that one conception. And so if our parents had done anything different on the night we were conceived, anything different, a different pair of gametes would have come together, and there would be a different person than us in our place. And so in 400 years of dropping Jimmy Akin into the year 1600, the ripples of that are going to affect everyone in human history. So that means I can't avoid changing history if I'm just transported back into the past. And if I can't avoid changing history, then what are my moral obligations? I can't stop the change. Everyone in 2025 is going to be different. So I would say that if I'm just transported into a changeable past and I don't have control over where I go, then I may as well do in 1600 what I would have done in 2025, which is the best I can.
Oh, yeah.
And so if I want to do the most good I can in 2025. So if you transport me back to 1600, I want to do the most good I can in 1600. I can't avoid change in the future. So I may try to make it the best future I can. So for example, if in 1600, there's no penicillin. I know the basic principles of how to make penicillin. I mean, I know it's bread mold, and I know it's used to treat a variety of infectious diseases. So I, in 1600, just off the top of my head, would introduce antibiotics. I mean, I'd have to experiment a little to find the right strain of the bread mold, but I would know how to find it. And that would improve human life. There would be plagues that decimated people that would not happen in the revised timeline, or at least would not be as bad in the revised timeline. I also know about the atomic theory of matter and basic principles of electromagnetism. I would begin development of electronics to make people's lives better. And if there are particular political events, now my knowledge of the 1600s is not as great as some other periods. I deliberately picked 1600 because it's not immediately before the Reformation or the Civil War or World War II or anything like that. It's a time period I don't know much about. But if I knew of particular events that were bad, I would do my best to change them. I also would be working within the constraints of the time period I'm in. Even though I have a lot of knowledge that could bring good, oh boy, do political situations get dicey. I mean, John Dee, Queen Elizabeth I's advisor, was allowed to have conversations with angels and do all kinds of stuff that were regarded as magic. But that doesn't mean Jimmy Akin's going to be allowed to do all kinds of stuff with his magical germ theory and atomic theory of matter and antibiotics and electronics and stuff like that. So I'd have to be very careful in working with the situation I'm in, and for my own self-protection. But within those constraints, I'm going to do the most good I can. And so I would say I would do the same thing in principle in 1600 or wherever I ended up in time as I would do in 2025, which is try to do the most good I can given the circumstances I'm in.
Robo Squid, thank you very much for the question. That actually gets us right to the break. So we'll take a quick break and come back with more weird questions for Jimmy Akin on this Halloween on Catholic Answers Live.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and his gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Hi, this is Mike Aquilino with a few words about St. Jerome. Praised as the greatest Bible scholar in the ancient world, St. Jerome translated the Bible not just once, but several times. Breaking new ground, he promoted consecrated life for women and involved these women in his work.
Catholic Answers Live. Thanks for being here with us. Don't forget, drive extra carefully tonight if you're in the car, extra carefully. A lot of little people out doing their thing tonight, collecting their reward for knocking and saying trick or treat. And let's get them home safe. It's Weird Questions for Jimmy Akin, and this one comes from Maximilian. Do Daleks have souls?
Daleks.
Sorry. Wait, let's try that again. Darren, just cut that out in post. Okay, just cut that out. This one comes from
We don't have post on a live stream.
Shoot. Do Daleks have souls?
Well, okay. So Daleks, for people who may not be aware, are a race from the science fiction franchise Doctor Who, which goes back to 1963 in Great Britain. And in fact, the Daleks were introduced in the second Doctor Who story. Daleks look kind of like big salt shakers, or sometimes in British documents they'll be referred to as looking like pepper pots, not the Iron Man character, but kind of like a salt shaker. And people often assume they're robots, but they're actually not, as established in Doctor Who and the Daleks, the second Doctor Who story ever. They're actually living creatures. In the second Doctor Who story, the Doctor goes to a planet called Skaro, which is inhabited by two races, the Khalids and the Daleks. The Daleks are mutants, as we later learn, that branched off from the Khalid race, and they actually these days they look kind of like icky green squids, kind of like that. And they move around in these salt shaker shaped or pepper pot shaped travel casings. So, which have various accoutrements like a plunger and a ray gun that'll zap you dead and stuff like that. So they're really living creatures. They just use an exoskeleton to move around. And so Psychelet, the historical Christian opinion on living creatures, other than humans, does it involve them having souls?
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
Living things have souls.
This has always been the case in Christian history. In fact, even in pre-Christian history, the Greek philosophers like Aristotle understood the soul to be the life principle of physical body. And so any living organism has a soul on Aristotle's view, and Christian thinkers like Thomas Aquinas adopted that view. There's even biblical support in that some animals are referred to as having souls in the Old Testament. So both in the biblical conception, although there's some nuances there, and in the philosophical conception, any living creature has a soul, which is why they're alive. As James chapter 2 says, the body without the spirit is dead. So it's the soul that keeps something alive. So since Khalid mutants or Daleks are alive, they would have souls. Now, that wouldn't tell us whether or not their souls survive death. On that question, there's been a difference of opinion. Some thinkers have been of the opinion that you need a rational soul for your soul to survive death. That was Thomas Aquinas' view, for example. But that's not church teaching. That's just his opinion, and it's based on philosophical arguments. A while back on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, I did a review of those arguments, and I didn't find them convincing at all. We also have actually empirical evidence that suggests that animals, at least some animals, have souls that do survive death. So I didn't concur with Aquinas on this point, and I think that that we need to be pretty generous in terms of who we allow into the afterlife. I mean, it's God's choice, so we shouldn't be too presumptive about this. When it comes to Daleks, now obviously they're fictional creatures, but they are rational creatures. In fact, they are very smart. They were able to basically battle the Time Lords to a standstill in the Great Time War, the greatest war in the history of the universe. And you don't battle the Time Lords to a stalemate if you don't have some smarts. So I would say they look like rational creatures. They may be evil, just like the devil is a rational but evil creature, but they look rational. And so I would say, even on Aquinas's theory, we should assume not only do they have souls, but they also should have an afterlife in which they would get their just comeuppance. However, due to their genetic programming, God would take it into account the fact they were programmed to be evil, and he would be merciful to them.
Maximilian, thank you for that question. And it being Halloween, let's do another ghost question. M. Jewel 84.
I'm not doing Dalek ghosts, not at the moment.
No, but we have established that they have a ghost.
Yeah.
If we assume ghosts are real, M. Jewel 84 asks, why would they even exist? Why would God allow a soul to stay on earth? Doesn't that go against everything Christ taught about what happens when humans die? How can one reconcile the Christian afterlife with ghosts?
Okay, so M. Jewel uses a rhetorical device that I don't particularly find helpful. M. Jewel says, doesn't the idea of ghosts go against everything Christ taught about what happens when humans die? Cy Kellett,
well,
did Christ ever say a human soul can't manifest on earth?
No.
Did Christ say a lot about what happens when humans die?
He
and
did
especially before Judgment Day?
No, he did not.
Yeah. Anytime someone uses the rhetorical device of, doesn't that go against everything about X? The answer is almost always no. The people use this, it's a form of exaggeration. People will say, if you propose a particular theory, let's say a scientific theory they don't like, they'll say, that goes against everything we know. Well, no, it doesn't, because not everything we know concerns this theory. And here we have a theological theory rather than a scientific theory. But in general, whenever people use go against everything rhetoric, it's almost always false. And usually people have stopped thinking at that point. They haven't carefully considered, well, what evidence do we really have? And what would it contradict, if anything? A person may have an impression that Jesus taught that the souls of departed humans never manifest on earth, but he didn't say that. So whenever I encounter go against everything rhetoric, my counsel is to wait a minute, hold on, let's set that rhetoric aside and step back and take a calm look at what the evidence actually is. And frankly, Jesus does not say that human souls can never manifest on earth. Now, M. Jewel, so let's proceed through M. Jewel's question, setting that rhetoric aside. The first part of the question is, if we assume ghosts are real, why would they even exist? Because they're human souls. That's fundamentally what a ghost is, a human soul or spirit. In fact, ghost is just the a Germanic word. In modern German, the word is Geist, but English is a Germanic language, and we got ghost from the same root. What that means is the same thing we use the Latin-based term spirit for. In Latin, spiritus means ghost, and ghost means spirit. So a ghost just is a human soul, and the Christian faith, including Jesus, teaches that human souls exist. So obviously ghosts exist in some sense, or they just exist. M. Jewel then says, why would God allow a ghost to stay on earth? Okay, now M. Jewel is presupposing an idea that isn't necessarily part of the general conception of ghosts. M. Jewel is presupposing that when a human dies, their spirit stays on earth. That's different than their spirit manifesting on earth. Their spirit may not be on earth, but they're allowed to appear here. And so there may be an apparition of the ghost, just like I can see you, Cy Kellett, here in Fayetteville, Arkansas, because you're on my screen. So I have an apparition of Cy Kellett, even though actually you're in San Diego, California. And having an apparition of Cy Kellett is perfectly appropriate for Halloween. I won't comment on how scary it is, but
you have already.
I have an apparition of Cy Kellett. Yeah. Now, so the same thing could be true of ghosts. The ghost might be in heaven or purgatory or hell, and yet they could appear to the living on earth, just the same way the saints in heaven do. In fact, you can call the apparition of a saint from heaven a ghost. We don't typically do that in colloquial English, but you could, because it's a spirit of someone in heaven. Spirits also, disembodied spirits, don't have a literal location. Various thinkers like Aquinas would say you can analogically or metaphorically describe a disembodied spirit as being located in the place where it's manifesting. So if a ghost is manifesting in your house, you could describe the ghost as being present, but it's not physically here. Ghosts spirits don't have physical dimensions, and so they don't occupy physical space as long as they're disembodied and not tied to a body. So I would say that's how one can reconcile the Christian afterlife with ghosts. We have spirits. They continue to endure. Whether they are in heaven, hell, or purgatory, it's possible for some spirits to manifest to those on earth in the form of an apparition. That doesn't mean they occupy physical space here on earth, but it does mean that they can, by God's permission, do things that have effects here on earth. And one of the reasons that may happen is because if they're a purgatorial ghost, then they can be working out things they need to process and get through as part of their purification on their way to heaven, like asking for people's prayers or asking for mass to be said for them, or saying I'm sorry to those they wronged in life, or saying I'm okay, I'm going to be fine. You don't need to be afraid for me. And so there are a lot of ways to reconcile the idea of the Christian afterlife with ghosts. They don't contradict each other, and fundamentally, historically, the most common Christian theory of what ghosts are is that they're usually, not always, but usually purgatorial ghosts.
All right, M. Jewel, thank you. Jimmy, I want to leave you enough time to answer this.
Okay.
It's going to take a long while, I'm sure. Grant wants to know this. Do you go clockwise or counterclockwise when praying the rosary?
Well, of course, one can do either, or one can do something else. And most of the time when I pray the rosary, I do something else.
Oh.
Most of the time, and I only mention this because I'm asked about it, I don't try to show this off, but if I'm using a physical rosary, I tend to go clockwise. But normally I don't use a physical rosary. I use my hands. And specifically, I use, and it can be either hand. I can do it with my left hand, or I can do it with my right hand, but I count on my hand because, there are 10 Hail Marys in each decade of the Rosary. I do the same thing with the Chaplet of Divine Mercy, but I use the American Sign Language numbering as a sign of solidarity.
Oh.
So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Wow, that is not what I was expecting from that answer. Grant, thanks very much for the question. Thanks, everybody who got us questions for Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin.
And
Jimmy,
happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween to you. Thank you. That will do it for us. I'll say it one more time. Please drive carefully with those little people out there. A lot of them don't know what they're doing. We'll see you next time, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.